honorable ladies, honorable gentlemen. The subject of my speech today is the existence of good and evil. I hope my talk will not only entertain you, but also give you an opportunity to think about the true meaning of those terms. Have you ever heard of Friedrich Nietzsche? I am sure you have. So, he was a famous German philosopher who said, "There is an old illusion, it is called good and evil." I think these words do not only show the problematic nature of knowing a difference between good and evil, but also illustrate one of the most important views on their existence. But to understand the whole subject, it is essential to know the historical background of it. Numerous thinkers have discussed the meaning of good and evil since ancient times. Socrates believed that moral goods are more important than anything else because they lead to truth and happiness. One of his students, Plato, believed that moral goods are more important than any other, even those that are absolutely connected to our existence. And he found the goodness the ultimate goal of humanity. These views used to be very popular, but after hundreds of years, new ideas were created. The two most important philosophers who had their own opinion on the existence of good and evil were Immanuel Kant and Friedrich Nietzsche. Kant thought that goodness is an objective value that leads people's decisions in every situation, and he found every deed that is against God, law, and society evil. Nietzsche's views were very different. He didn't believe in objective morality and free will. He thought nothing is really good nor bad because it is just impossible to judge the nature of people's deeds. Nowadays, the subject of good and evil is still popular and widely discussed. Many people are not sure what should be their opinion on things like discrimination, wars, and drugs. I find capital punishment a good example of a huge moral dilemma that affects many people. People who commit the worst crimes are sometimes sentenced to death. There's a huge group of individuals that believes rapists, terrorists, and murderers ought to be killed for hurting others. On the other hand, numerous people say that it isn't really a solution, and, for example, life sentence might be a better punishment because it is more humanitarian and it might actually be worse for the criminals. But the subject of good and evil also appears in more everyday life situations. For instance, is being always polite a good thing? Many people say we ought to be always kind and empathetic no matter how we feel. Because when we are kind to the others, we can receive more empathy and emotional support. On the other hand, it is unlikely to be always polite, especially while suffering or being in a bad mood. So, is there really an objective way to judge it? In my opinion, not at all. Why? Because it is a matter of thinking, and every person has their own views, values, and experiences that could lead their decisions in particular situation. To conclude, I agree with Friedrich Nietzsche's words, "There is an old illusion, it is called good and evil," because it is impossible to explain the world only by using these two terms. Personally, I find many things good and bad, but the key factor in my judgment is my way of thinking and my moral code. Just like every other person has their own views, values, and morality. And that is why I think there's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Thank you very much.
are only illusions, like you said. I suppose something that we cannot deny is the existence of suffering. What could be the sense of suffering?
Well, it strongly depends on the cultural context, actually, because suffering is an essential element of living, as you said, and I definitely agree here. But it strongly depends on a culture, because, for example, in Judeo-Christian religions, many people believe that, for example, Jesus, while suffering, was saving our world, and sometimes it is a must to suffer because it might cause something good for the humanity, and also many faiths, like, for example, Hinduism and Buddhism, find suffering nothing good nor bad, but just an element of our world that's essential to live on the earth. So I can't really tell you whether it's good or bad, but it's definitely important, and it strongly depends on the culture and faith whether the person lives in. But in my personal opinion, I'm not an enjoyer of suffering. I'm not a masochist, definitely. But sometimes it might be, it might be necessary to do something.
Pronunciation. If we were to live in a world without good and evil, what do you think our world would look like right now?
It is absolutely impossible to answer to that question, because the concept of good and evil appears only in our minds, and it's not objectively defined. It's defined by our thinking. So I think people would need to not think if the world would be without living, and without living with thinking of good and evil. So I do not think it's possible to answer this question. I can only tell you that people since ancient times tried to divide the world to good and bad in almost every culture. So I think it's essential to our nature, and it's impossible to answer this question.
Thank you.